So we're on the farm today of Henry Beiler. It's called Wholesome Acre Farms. Henry's farm is near Watsontown, Pennsylvania, so that's close to Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And we're here. Henry does both grain production and processing, but at this time of year the crops have been harvested, so we're going to focus on his processing enterprise. And Henry's processing enterprise is an excellent example of how successful farmers can be in on-farm processing. He's built a mill house, which we're about to visit, and in that mill house he not only has a mill, a small-scale mill that you'll see, but he also has a dehulling machine, which he himself has developed. The dehulling machine is a critical component for those of you that want to grow the ancient wheats or any grain that's in a hull. For example, einkorn, emmer, and spelt. These ancient wheats have high market potential, but they don't thresh clean in the combine or thresher. They hold onto their hulls, so you need an extra step to get them ready for milling or selling as berries. And Henry, you're going to see Henry's dehulling machine. He actually got plans from Nigel Tudor. Nigel Tudor is another excellent example of a farmer miller processor in south of Pittsburgh. And Henry has redesigned the dehuller a bit. You'll see how it operates. It works extremely well on einkorn, emmer, and spelt, and can also do some other grains.
So yeah, this hopper where the grain goes in, and this right here, inside here, is the dehulling and the milling mechanism. And if you come around the other side here, like you see here, this is built that we can either, we can put this on, put a shaft and a bearing on to mount the flails on inside, or we can leave this off and mount an electric motor right in there. The shaft goes inside and the flails mount right on the electric motor. Yeah, it's small. It's really very simple.
And what is it used for?
For dehulling, you can run it at slow speed with dehulling screens, and then you can dehull. Or take the dehulling screens out, put flour screens in, which is a real fine screen. Change your speed, up your speed to around 3,000, and then you can mill flour with it.
And how much, and so you call this a trumpet mill?
Trumpet mill.
Uh-huh. And how much does this cost?
The price on this, with the shaft and the bearings as a belt drive, is $13.75. Mm-hmm. That includes the flour screens, but no dehulling screens.
Mm-hmm. So for example, I just bought one for OGRIN, for my organization, and it costs $15.75 with some extra screens for dehulling.
Yeah.
So I think I'm getting a screen that works for einkorn and then another screen that works for spelt and emmer.
Yes. And that does not include the electric motor then.
Right. I'm going to be taking one of these with me today and having it fitted out with I think it's a 10 horsepower motor.
Yes.
And then it'll be mounted so that in my case I'll be bringing it around to some very small farms that are just starting to try. They have like a 1/4 acre of einkorn. So this is a perfect opportunity for them to see if they can, this kind of small scale equipment is perfect for farmers to get started, because it works really well, as you'll see, but it's not expensive.
And the idea, that brings us back to the first idea of this is a real small scale machine that a farmer can start with. So once the farmer grows more, the dehulling capacity of this may not be enough anymore. So then they can upgrade to a bigger dehuller and use this just for a mill, and don't have to change it around every time.
And you'll see a standalone dehuller that has a higher throughput in just a minute in Henry's mill house. So this is einkorn going into the hopper. And Henry, is this new on top there? What is that?
That is something I set out to do, an air recirculation.
Oh.
that picks up the stuff that comes off the scalping screen and pulls it back up into the box, and then I can either open this up and drop the grain back in, or...
So that saves you from having to manually collect the undehulled kernels and recirculate it by hand. And is it working well?
I was hoping it'd drop it by itself, but it doesn't.
I
have
see.
to either shut it down or just open it up manually and make sure it comes down.
Nevertheless, it saves work.
It does.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I thought that was new. So this is your what I call your larger scale dedicated dehuller.
Yes.
This is only meant for dehulling, correct?
Yes.
And what's the mechanism?
There's a woven wire screen, a circle, 10-inch diameter on the inside there, and then there's flails on the inside. There's 4 flails that roll around in there, and the idea is that you fill that with a fair amount of grain. You don't want just a little bit of grain. You want a fair amount of grain in there, and that'll swirl it in there on the woven wire screen, and actually kind of peels the holes off. And when the holes are peeled off, it'll work down through the screen, drop out the bottom. Of course, then we have this dust collector pipe up here to pull air up. That pulls some of the light holes off, it pulls the dust off, and then the rest falls down and goes over the cleaner, being separated different ways. The stuff that's not dehulled will come down this tray, this trowel here, gets sucked into the pipe and gets pulled back over, gets dropped back down in the box.
And then what are these other, where does the grain come out, the cleaned, dehulled?
The clean grain falls down through, and then there's a fan there blowing air up, and the grain will fall down through the air column, slides on down, and we put this box underneath to catch the finished grain. So we're always, as it is running, there's clean grain falling out the bottom. And this air column is also blowing up, which is blowing up through the grain. We blow it hard enough that it picks up the lightest kernels, any kernels that fall down through that are not dehulled, and it'll blow them up here. The heaviest stuff drops down here, comes down in this box, this drum here. Lighter stuff is blown back in this bag. There's usually almost no kernels in this bag. There's lots of kernels in here. These are smaller kernels, cracked kernels, and those always just go back in the box. Although we do like to keep these separate, do them later, and that is milled for pie and pastries, cake, cookies, stuff like that. We always like to use the first time through, we like to use that for the bread flour. We like to have the biggest, nicest kernels for bread flour.
And how is this powered?
It's powered, there's a line shaft coming in from a diesel that's outside, and then belts down to the mill. But you sold a number of these that are being powered with a 10 horsepower motor, correct? Yes, yeah. Yes. These can also be, you can also put a 10 horse motor on these dehulling machines here.
And you can also, I've seen one of them at least, it's equipped with a digital readout. Is that right?
Digital readout.
For speed?
For speed,
yeah.
Yes. Yes,
yeah.
with the VFD.
I think Stuart has one with that. Yeah. So you can power this however you want.
Yes.
But the mechanism is the same. And this is it's from this. This was reimagined from designs you got from Nigel Tudor, yes. Correct? This is not an impact dehuller. This is an abrasion dehuller. So it's abrading through that screen as opposed to an impact dehuller. But this is particularly good for the hulled grains. Does just an excellent job. Why don't you talk us through the mill first? This one you can actually show them the mechanism, can't you? Or is it
open it up?
Is that too hard?
No, it's not hard.
I'll let you get set.
Maybe you can show these flip flaps being open.
What I like about this machine too is that it's really easy. The one I have been using to change screens and so there you can see what you saw before.
And here I can easily open it up to show the flails. see the flail system in there, and that of course will be spinning.
And here, instead of having a screen all the way around, there's what I'd call a half screen, right?
You have a screen on either side.
Can you get a photo of a picture of the screen too? Yeah. So there's that's the flower screen. And is that the finest mesh you can order? Or?
I think that is the finest mesh that is available.
Yeah, makes a nice flower. And the innards of that look very much like the dehuller he just showed you, with the exception that the screen goes all the way around.
And the idea of this was to have a machine that is easy to change the screens. Just have these clamps up here. The old machine used to have a slot that you had to slide these screens in, and of course everything filled up with flour, and it's always so hard to change the screens. And of course this, you can take this off and we can brush it down, we can blow it down. Where the old machine, you couldn't get into the bottom of it to clean it out, and it had this iron on the inside and always tended to have a rust build up in there.
Great. Yeah, no, I think now if we can just see everything in operation, that would be fantastic. That this, the reveal, it's better with the mask on. This you can see, are there some hulls still in evidence? Yes, but very few. So few, in fact, that you can easily, Henry is selling this as berries to end users, and then he also, as you saw, is milling this. So there are a few hulls left. They really don't impact quality much at all. And of course, for a home buyer, somebody who's using it at home, if you're going to use this to make a rice substitute dish, we always recommend that you wash it anyway. So if you put this in a bowl of water, all the remaining hull will come, and you can just take them off. But I don't bother to do that. Why? Because the hull has good things in for you. So this is just a very, very high quality product that Henry is getting with, amazingly, that's a fanning mill. It's a fanning mill that he's refined, and he's gotten exactly the right screens, and it does the job for him. And if he can do it, then the rest of us can eventually figure it out too.
I usually tell people that yes, we still have some holes on here. It doesn't look like a perfect product, but we're doing it with cheap equipment. We have a very low cost product here. If we would upgrade to
a gravity table,
put a gravity table in, yes, we could have a 100% clean product with no holes, but the price would go up according.
Yeah.
So this is the low cost way to do it, and it works.
And in the future, maybe 3-5 years down the line, we may have a low cost gravity table that you can pair. But for now, this does a very good job. And
I've asked my customers, and yes, it seems. I mean, I've had new customers have asked about these holes, but yeah, I've never had a customer that, oh, they just don't like the holes. If we could just get rid of these holes, I've never had it.
Yeah. So this is a beautiful product, and it's a very highly marketable product that can sell once it reaches this stage or in the flower stage for a high price, as high a price as a vegetable per unit land area. And that's what we're interested in, because we want even vegetable growers to grow this. It's a beautiful rotation crop for a vegetable farm. And if you can produce the same amount of money, you know, now we're not talking about a cover crop. I love cover crops, but most people can't afford them all the time. You're still keeping the land in production. You're pushing organic matter into the soil, restoring the soil, and you're breaking the pest and disease cycles for a lot of your vegetable species. So this can work at a larger scale, at a micro scale, and now we have the equipment, thanks to people like Henry and Nigel, that farmers can actually afford it. We're now at Small Valley Milling near Halifax, Pennsylvania, so we're a little bit north of Harrisburg, out in rural Dauphin County. And sitting next to me at an appropriate social distance is Joel Steigman, who's one of the owners and operators of Small Valley Milling, along with his wife Elaine and his son Eric. And they're very, very busy, but they've given us a little bit of time today to help you see what they've been up to. And I wanted to point out the contrast between what the Steigmans are doing here and what you saw at Henry Beiler's, which is a small-scale operation. There are many, many mills that are bigger than the Steigmans, but in the organic community in the Northeast, this is a large-size mill. And the interesting thing about the Steigmans, just like Henry Beiler, is that they're farmer millers, farmer processors. I know you do all sorts of things at the mill, you mill, but you're also doing a lot of the farming now, right?
Right.
And so, you're certified organic?
We've been certified organic since 1999. It's on about 300 acres. And, just the way the economy's going, we used to raise like 100 acres of hay, and now since the dairy guys are having trouble and the hay market's pretty bad, we're shifting more to some small grains, and because of the weather, we're cutting back on our corn acres and trying some sorghum. This is the first year I tried, this is the first year I tried no-till soybeans. They had a meeting up here about no-till organic, no-till beans, and we tried that, so I have like 7 acres of that.
And you grew spring hulless barley this year.
Hulless barley, and I actually raised hemp last year.
Yeah, so you're always, but one of your initial innovations in terms of crops was when you started growing spelt. And that was what, around 1999?
Something like that.
Yeah. And so why did you decide to try spelt?
Money.
That's a good answer.
Well, we were struggling, you know, when you're conventional and the taxes and everything. My wife and I always were working away, and then we were farming on the side, and you know, you couldn't hardly make ends meet. And we sold this wheat to another organic mill, and he said, "Oh, there's some pretty lucrative thing called spelt." And I said, "Well, what's that like?" And then he told us that the other guy and I went out to Ohio and got a ton of spelt to bring back, and you know, we planted. And well, we were talking about that before. There was a sale over here, and they had an oat roller or an oat dehuller, a public sale. We bought that. We figured out we could use that to dehull the spelt. That was the beginning of the spelt business.
And so spelt is still one of your main crops,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So how many acres of spelt do you grow on your farm?
It varies.
And but you buy in too, the demand.
We have guys. There's a lot of organic guys around here raised for us. We know organic guys in Michigan. And, yeah, there's a 30,000 bushel bin there. We sell that. We might have like 50,000 bushels of spelt a year.
And so in the mill, you make that into various products, right?
We sell kernels, we sell white flour, we sell whole flour.
And you sell puffed spelt,
Yep.
which is one of my favorites. It's just a delicious.
Yep.
I'm working my way through 5 pounds now, so it's terrific. So one of the reasons I think you've told me before, and I've heard from other spelt growers, that spelt is a nice crop it's one of these ancient grains, but it can yield almost as much as wheat in the hull, correct?
Correct.
So you get a fairly decent yield. So those of you that are thinking about some of these grains, one of the great things about spelt is that it has a fairly good yield on it. Of course, you have to subtract 25, 35% to take when you take the hulls off. But it's a sturdy crop. You can plant it late if you have to. Is that right?
Yep, we planted a couple years ago. We planted December 15th. The weather was that bad. Usually we put the spelt in after corn in our rotation, and the corn never dried down, and it got late. So we got the corn off, and yeah, the fields were muddy. I always plow. We plowed, and the ground was almost like it would freeze at night. It gets muddy, and you couldn't work with it. So we plowed it, and then it got stiff, and I took a disc over it one day and sort of leveled it up a little bit. It was rough, and had to let it sit that day. Then the next day, when it was still kind of stiff there, we put the spelt in, like I said, December 15th, and you know, we didn't know if it was going to make it or not. But spring came around, and the rains and whatever, those clumps of dirt, they just melt down. They got flat. The spelt came up. All right.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So spelt is a tough crop,
Right.
and it has a good market. It's probably still the most well known of the ancient wheats, wouldn't you say?
Yep.
And a lot of people, I know you sell to a lot of bakeries in the Northeast, and all over the place. Not just spelt, of course, but spelt is interesting because in our taste testing, it's always one of the top. Blind tasting, always one of the top. People really like it. It's sweet, it's nutty, it has a very distinctive flavor. But you also grow emmer, not as much, right? Yeah. And they're one of the few places in the Northeast where you can get emmer grain to or emmer flour. They now sell einkorn. So the three ancient wheats we've been talking about, Small Valley Milling is a good source of supply. But and notice, however, that Joel is always innovating. He's trying white sorghum. He has, behind us in these totes are black, purple, and cream-colored hulless barley, which we're going to start doing some taste tests and give to bakers to see if they like. So he's been pushing his business forward, but by doing what he's doing, he also pushes the whole community forward because of this innovation. So I wanted to ask you more about the processing now. I think one of the very innovative features of Small Valley is that you have a roller mill, right?
Right.
And so for people here that don't know anything about milling, what is special about a roller mill?
It's basically it's a way you get white flour. If you have a stone mill or a hammer mill, the brand and everything gets broken down into fine particles to go through a screen. So you have a roller mill. There's sets of rolls, and in the beginning they're corrugated, and it peels off the bran so that you can, then it goes through a sifter, you can separate that, and the white flour is the starch inside the seed there. And it's about the only way. It keeps circling through these different degrees of corrugation until it ends up with it smooth, and the bran flakes is just like bran, like the piece of horses do, and people like to eat.
So this roller mill that you had, you bought the rolls used, right?
We bought the whole thing, yeah, used, yeah.
Because that would cost several $100,000, yeah, new.
New roller mills are, like you're saying, hundreds of thousands or $500,000 or whatever. I think we bought those 4 roll stands and paid like $8,000.
So I always say that Small Valley Milling is just the best example that I know of people who really are clever about building a business. And in addition to the roller mill, what other mills do you use?
Oh, the hammer mill and the stone mill. One thing I think is interesting, we use pneumatic systems where we don't use bucket elevators when we're processing the flour. Everything's sucked with air. through a pipe to the next station that it's going to. And people say that stone milling, oh, it's so much cooler. And we've taken, well, there's thermometers, and the hammer mill, the stone mill, and the roller mill is all about the same, within a couple of degrees. About 50 degrees. That's holding warm. Now, if you would just hammer mill that or roll it, I think maybe they'd be hotter. They'd stay hotter, let's put it that way. But when you got cold air coming through there,
That's a good point.
Air coming through there, it draws the heat away almost instantaneously.
And that keeps the quality of the flour high.
Yep.
Speaking of the word quality, one of the other big defining features of your operation is your really almost ruthless emphasis on high quality.
Oh, yeah. That's one thing about spelt. If you come up, when you combine wheat and in the field and you smell it, it smells fresh and good. But you let it in a bin for 6 months or longer, it loses that freshness. Where we store this spelt in the hull, it doesn't come in contact with the air until we dehull it. And usually we dehull it in one step and it blows over and it gets filled with flour that day or the next day. So it stays fresh, and I think that's why it smells sweet and fresh and it's more aroma.
That's right. You also, I know that, throughout their assembly line, you use a lot of magnets. You're trying to keep any metal contamination out. And then when you package, you describe what you do to try to keep the product fresh even when it reaches somebody else's shelf.
So we put a vacuum system in, and we vacuum pack the whole grains in plastic, and it has CO2 in it, so that it sucks out the air. The air is what's making it oxidize and age. So it does two things. If there's any bugs in there, the bugs, people don't believe this, but the bugs are laid in the field, and you can't see it. But it takes two things. It takes moisture and heat. When they get the right moisture and heat, they come alive and they drill out through the kernel. So
these are grain weevils, yeah.
Grain weevils.
Yeah, they're swine.
So we have this vacuum packer there that sucks out the oxygen, and it puts in a certain amount of CO2 in there, and it's vacuum sealed. And we've kept grain for 2-3 years, in these plastic bags at 6 and 25 cents. You open them up and it smells just like you put it in.
So one of the other interesting things about Small Valley Milling, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but they sell a lot of wholesale. You sell lots of bulk orders, and I know that's what you like. But they also have an online store, and I think you get quite a bit of customers that way too. Yeah, and especially through the pandemic, I bet you were getting orders.
Love it.
Yeah, yeah. So it's innovative marketing as well. But I think that quality is so important, and people know when they buy a Small Valley Milling product that it's going to be yeah.
That's another thing how clean we make it. There's a pre-cleaner over here when we get grain in from the field or from somebody else or whatever. We run it through that pre-cleaner. It takes out the dust and the broken kernels, the weed seed, the dust, and whatever. And before it ever goes into storage. So we do that. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, the other thing I like, I'm into this thing more than Eric and Elaine, is this value-added market like she's talking about. We puff stuff, we got, let's just call it an oat roller, and that's picking up, and I fool around right now with extruding, and either cereal or snacks or whatever, but right now that's a little rough.
Yeah.
But you always have to start out with nothing.
Yeah.
Go from there.
Yeah. So at a different scale, you're seeing what what Henry was doing as well. Use your own labor as much as you can if you're starting out. It helps if Henry's a carpenter. These folks are master. They know how to build things. They know how to fix things. Those buildings you built, right?
Yeah, we built everything.
Just he and his son. In fact, I remember when the mill was just about ready to start up, the only thing you didn't do was the electrical work, right?
Right, yep.
Because that was so intense and you wanted to have it exactly right. Yeah. The other thing is that, correct me if I'm wrong, you started out by dehulling. They had a dehulling enterprise, and at one point they must have been the only dehuller in the Northeast. I think they were the first. So they started with a Roskamp. They now have a Kodima, which is another impact dehuller. We saw an abrasion type at Henry's. And so that is the basic processing step that allows you to make money selling spelt. But they wanted to get into the flour business, but they were building the mill slowly by slowly, as my Kenyan friends would say. And they did something which I think is really brilliant. They had another mill it for you, but they labeled it and started selling it as their product. Is that right? And what did that do for you?
That got us a market. You know, that was our market where we didn't have the infrastructure to buy all this equipment and sit there and hope somebody would come and buy something. So there was another organic mill, like she's saying, down Manville. And I said, he was grinding. We were selling him grain. And we were selling him spelt, and he was putting his label on. I said, hey, will you grind something for me and put our label on? He said, sure. So then we'd go down there and take a truckload of grain, and we'd make, whatever we wanted. And after a while, that wore out. Then we went up to Snavely's there, and because it kept getting bigger, I'd take one of these tractor trailer loads of grain and take it up there, and they said, oh, I can't do it right now. We're too busy, just like Eric is right now. Can you imagine if somebody come in here with a truck and say, hey, I need this ground right now?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what forced us into the roller mill business. We had to make up our mind. Well, we were selling, like Elizabeth said, we were selling grain kernels, and then that's how everybody says, is that all you have? Don't you have anything else? Well, then we got it hooked up. I told you how we got started the flour business. Then after that, it just keeps going. Don't you have anything else? So we just keep adding a little of this, and it just picks up.
Yeah. Would you say there's what am I missing? I mean, there's so much that's interesting about your business, and we'll see a little bit of it. They're very busy, and it's COVID time, so we don't want to intrude. But, I know what I wanted you to talk about a little bit. One of the very striking things when you come to the mill are all the bins.
Right.
And Joel and I have both seen total disasters. Starting farmers, especially if they have never grown grains before, they usually overlook a critical factor, which is storage. You cannot sell the crop out of the field. It's almost impossible to do that, which means you have to be able to safely store it. The longer you can safely store it, the more you have a chance of really making money, because you can pick and choose your markets. And at the small scale, you saw what Henry was doing. That's fine. At that scale, it's working for him. But once you get to a certain scale, if you have a 10-acre field, what do you think? What are your options for storage? A bin, right?
Put a bin up, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. These guys combine this stuff. They'll bring it in here, and we have all these bins here, but they don't all have dryers on them. So you want this grain to be like 12% for storage. So they'll come in here with a 15, 16% load of stuff. What do you get to with it? If I don't have a bin with a dryer in, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You need a bin with a dryer, you need a fan. And so, in bugs, that's the other thing. Now, we've been harping on these guys that we buy from every year. Do you have bugs? Oh, no, I don't have any bugs in my grain. This year, same thing. We have those screens. We were actually thinking of buying our growers a set of those screens and giving them to them so that they can check their grain and they can see the bugs crawling around. Because it seems like 2 guys came so far this year. Came in here, Eric gets a sample. You see the bugs crawling around. I don't want those bugs in my 30,000 bushel bin eating the other guys. I already paid him for that grain. And if those bugs eat the grain, they kill the quality. So he rejected 2 guys that were been here for a long time.
Yeah.
He said, take it back. When you got dead bugs, I'll buy it.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's again, that comes back to quality, and you notice that they're insisting on quality right out of the field. You also do your own testing, right?
Yep.
You test for vomitoxin, protein, falling number,
Yep.
and that way they know what they're getting. And for any of you that are going to grow grains, those 3 parameters that for food grade material, those 3 parameters we just mentioned, vomitoxin, falling number, protein, you have to provide those figures or work with a processing entity that will test them for you. Nobody's going to buy your grain if they don't know what they're buying, and that's as it should be. So whether you're working on a small scale or a large scale, that testing is important. Entities like Small Valley Milling that are buying in will do the testing, but there are also a whole bunch of labs that we can talk about later that will test your grain. It's really critically important because the whole of our Northeast grain specialty economy, specialty grain economy, is based on quality. So the principle here is don't be overwhelmed by all the bins you're seeing because the Steigman started out with nothing.
No bins at all.
They just build up gradually. And the point is keep your eyes open for used bins or start checking into, figure out approximately how much grain you're going to be producing on a particular field and start looking at bin, what does a small hopper bin cost and so forth.
I'll tell you what, one thing that's really becoming available now, a lot of these farms that are close to towns or cities have bins on them, and the developer will buy the farm. He doesn't want the bins. He'll just about tell you to take them for nothing.
Yeah, so
and
you can...
Usually you can buy a bin for the value what a new burner and a floor cost. So, but you gotta look to see that they aren't rotted out along the bottom. What
That's
the floor
right.
looks like. But there's good buys out there, but you gotta be shopping.
Yeah, that's right, and that's what Small Valley has been doing from the very beginning. They're very smart, very canny, and sometimes you have to wait a while to find what you need.